On May 26, 1940, Sergeant Charles Coward of the Royal Army Service Corps surrendered to German forces near Calais, France, as British and French defences crumbled. He became a prisoner of war, transported in cattle cars with other Allied soldiers through Belgium and into Germany. 3 days without adequate food or water taught him the harsh reality that the Geneva Convention offered little protection. Coward's destination was Stalag 8B Lambsdorff, a vast POW camp in Silesia. There he was processed, assigned a number, and subjected to the grim monotony of camp life. He quickly learned to navigate the camp's complex hierarchy, observing guard routines and bribing sentries with Red Cross cigarettes. Despite several escape attempts, all unsuccessful, Coward endured 3 years at Lambsdorff until transfer orders arrived in October 1943. He and dozens of other British POWs were moved by train to occupied Poland. The journey's destination, kept secret by their guards, spread fear through the cramped car, a Labour camp. The sight that greeted Coward upon arrival solidified his fears. Towering watchtowers, electrified barbed wire, and distant chimneys spewing an organic, sickening smoke unlike anything he had ever encountered. The destination stamped on documents revealed the camp's name, Auschwitz III, Monowitz. The British compound at Monowitz was an anomaly, a small island of relative privilege within a vast ocean of unspeakable horror. While British POWs received Red Cross parcels and were treated with contempt, but not the murderous brutality reserved for others, the distinction was stark. Beyond their wire, thousands of prisoners, skeletal and hollow-eyed, worked themselves to death at the IG Farben Buna synthetic rubber plant. These were not POWs. They were Jews, Soviet prisoners, and Polish political inmates subjected to extermination through labor. The Buna Works, a massive industrial complex, employed slave labor to build a factory that would never achieve its intended output. Each morning, Coward marched with British POWs alongside Jewish prisoners supervised by SS guards. In whispered exchanges, Coward gleaned terrifying truths about Auschwitz-Birkenau, the extermination camp 3 kilometers away. The smoke from those distant chimneys meant crematoriums, and the daily arrival of trains carried Hungarian and Polish Jews to their destruction on the selection ramp. Daily life at Monowitz was a precisely orchestrated hell. Dawn brought roll call, often lasting hours in all weather, as guards punished entire barracks for a single missing inmate. Then came the 12-hour shifts at Buna, mixing concrete, carrying steel beams, and digging foundations under constant threat of beatings. Coward witnessed a capo strike a Jewish prisoner with a shovel for stumbling under a concrete bag. Aid was unthinkable, as it would invite the same brutal punishment. Midday brought watery soup, barely enough to sustain life, with Jewish prisoners receiving even smaller, often non-existent portions. Men collapsed from exhaustion and starvation, their bodies quickly removed, replaced by new arrivals on the next transport. One incident haunted Coward weeks into his time at Monowitz. A young Jewish prisoner, his hand crushed by fallen planks, screamed. An SS guard responded by shooting him through the head, the execution taking mere seconds before work resumed. Coward recognized this as industrialized murder, genocide disguised as labor. While British POWs returned to their compound, fed and allowed contact with the outside world, Jewish prisoners faced overcrowded barracks where typhus and dysentery were as deadly as bullets, and the daily death toll was meticulously recorded. November 1943 found Coward pondering the nature of escape. Fellow POWs planned traditional breakouts, but Coward saw their limitations. Saving 1 or 2 men seemed insignificant against the daily slaughter outside the wire. His morality shifted. Personal freedom seemed hollow if it meant remaining silent about mass murder. Traditional escape meant abandoning the Jewish prisoners. A new, dangerous idea began to form. What if his mission wasn't to escape, but to dismantle the system from within? Coward re-evaluated the camp's logistics. He observed bribeable SS guards, sympathetic Polish civilian workers, and exploitable bureaucratic systems. The Buna works employed thousands of Polish civilians who moved freely between the camp and the outside world. He noticed camp security focused on preventing escapes, not entries. Civilian workers passed with minimal inspection. The possibility solidified. Swap identities with a civilian worker, move freely, gather evidence, and make contacts beyond the wire. He could get out, but more importantly, he could get back in with supplies, forged documents, anything to save even one life. The decision crystallized in December 1943 as Coward witnessed a transport arrive at Birkenau. From his work detail, he saw families torn apart, children separated from mothers, and columns marching toward gas chambers disguised as showers. The smoke rose thicker that evening, cementing his resolve. Traditional escape offered personal freedom, but would make him a coward. His freedom meant nothing if purchased with silence. Witnesses would be needed, evidence required, and survivors would need proof that resistance existed. That winter night, Coward's mission began. He transformed from a prisoner seeking escape into an infiltrator. His first contact was a Polish electrician at Buna, bribed with cigarettes and chocolate to help him temporarily switch identities. The Pole agreed, driven by greed and a glimmer of conscience. A network quickly formed, built on venality and desperation. Coward acquired civilian clothes, memorized worker names, and studied guard rotations to identify those who were lax. The first test came in January 1944. Coward swapped uniforms with a Polish worker, walked out through the civilian gate, spent 4 hours gathering information in Monowitz town, and returned before roll call. The guards noticed nothing. The system worked. Coward realized he possessed a weapon more potent than any tunnel. He could move between worlds, a prisoner and a free man, gathering evidence and planning rescues while his captors remained oblivious. His war, far from ending in 1940, had merely changed form. Now the battle was not for his own freedom, but for the lives marked for annihilation. Charles Coward would spend the next year repeatedly infiltrating Auschwitz, becoming an enemy his captors never comprehended. The 12-foot electrified fence around Auschwitz enclosed E715. Sergeant Charles Coward, at 0400 on October 12, 1944, pressed against a latrine wall, observing the guard rotation through a gap in the planks. He had a 2-minute window between Klimt's patrol and the searchlight. Clutched under his prisoner jacket was a British battle-dress tunic, once belonging to Private Hans Hoffmann, a German POW who died 3 days prior at the Buna factory. Coward had bribed a capo with corned beef to delay Hoffmann's death report, creating a ghost identity. When the searchlight swung away, Coward moved. His stolen German boots silenced his steps on the frozen mud. He crawled toward a section of the fence he'd secretly weakened during a repair detail 2 weeks earlier. The wires screeched as he forced them apart, tearing his clothes. And he rolled into the shadows of Barracks 14 in the Jewish men's section. The barracks reeked of unwashed bodies, dysentery, and death. 200 men were jammed into a space meant for 80. Coward, familiar with the layout from prior incursions, found his target, David Wisnia, prisoner 83526, a 19-year-old former Polish soldier selected for Sonderkommando duty in 3 days. Sonderkommando, working the gas chambers, had a life expectancy of 4 months. Coward handed Wisnia the battle dress. "Put this on, over your stripes, under your jacket. Leave the camp jacket open enough to show the tunic." Wisnia, trembling from malnutrition, struggled with the buttons, so Coward fastened them. "Tomorrow, 0600 roll call. Respond to your number, then join the British POW group for Buna work. Column 3, 5th row. Stand next to Sergeant McKibben. Scots Guards, red hair, missing 2 fingers. Say nothing. If questioned, you're Private Hoffmann. transferred from Stalag 8B due to tuberculosis exposure. The paperwork is in the camp office. I put it there. The plan's effectiveness lay in exploiting Auschwitz's bureaucracy. SS guards rarely scrutinized British POWs for anything beyond documentation. The biggest risk was Wisnia's emaciated appearance. "Walk like a soldier," Coward instructed. "Eyes forward, shoulders back. Your British Army, captured at Dunkirk, a fighting man." Guards read posture before faces. Coward had made 7 such swaps since August. 4 men were now in Buna's British Labour section, and 2 had been transferred to other POW camps during an exchange. 1 had been recaptured after a breakdown, his fate unknown. But the crematorium burned hotter that night. From his pocket, Coward produced a tiny paper with microscopic statistics. Transport dates, selection numbers, gas chamber totals. 7,000 Hungarian Jews gassed in early September, 12,000 from Theresienstadt later that month. He'd witnessed the arrivals, counted those sent to the gas chambers versus labour camps, meticulously recording the data in various hidden spots as future evidence. The barracks door scraped open. Coward flattened himself, covering Wisnia's mouth. Boots approached, not prisoners' shuffles, but the deliberate tread of authority. A flashlight beam swept the dark, illuminating sleeping men. "Block L tester," a voice called. The block elder, a collaborating Czech Jew, emerged. "Ja, Herr Unterscharführer." Yesterday's count had discrepancies. 2 extra here. 2 short in block 19. Explain. The SS junior squad leader suspected prisoner movement, a common but punishable act. The elder practiced, lied smoothly. Block 19 had 4 deaths overnight. The hospital barracks corrected the count, but adjustments weren't updated before roll call. "I submitted the paperwork yesterday," the SS man grunted, his flashlight beam passing within 3 feet of Coward, illuminating his boot. Coward held his breath. The beam moved on. "Ensure your paperwork is timely, Block L tester. Discrepancies create work." The boots retreated. Coward released Wisnia. The elder whispered, "You risk everyone, Englishman. They'll execute 50, maybe 100, in reprisal." "They'll execute you all anyway," Coward whispered back. "At least this way some survive." He pressed 10 cigarettes, a week's bread ration, into the elder's hand. Payment for silence and collaboration that served life. Coward retraced his steps at 0435, the 35-minute searchlight gap still present. However, the pre-dawn grey light lessened the shadows. He squeezed through the fence. A barb tore his left forearm. Blood warmed his sleeve, but there was no time to assess the wound. 80 meters away stood the guard tower, and Klimt's patrol would return in 90 seconds. He sprinted the last 20 meters to E715's latrine, dove inside, and pressed against the wall. He forced his ragged breaths silent. Boots crunched outside, passing, fading into the pre-dawn stillness. His forearm burned. He found a 4-inch tear, bleeding freely. He tore a strip from his undershirt, wrapped it tightly, and tied it with his teeth. Visiting the British medical officer, Captain Hendry, would raise questions. He preferred to treat it himself, risking infection rather than scrutiny. The real danger emerged at morning roll call. Untersturmführer Shuttle conducted a random identity check, a monthly sadistic ritual. Most checks ended quickly, some with beatings, rarely with intensified interrogation. Coward stood in column 3, row 7, among 500 British POWs in the cold. Shuttle, immaculate in black, slowly moved down the ranks. He questioned McKibben, who recited his particulars immediately. His finger moved to David Wisnia, now in Private Hans Hoffmann's identity. "Name!" Shuttle's voice flatly commanded. Wisnia's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. The silence stretched. The terror of 4 years in Auschwitz froze his voice. "Private Hans Hoffmann, sir." Coward's voice, raspy with the deliberate phlegm and the rattle of tuberculosis, cut through the formation. Every man in column 3 turned. Coward stood at attention in row 7. Transferred from Stalag Veit B, October 8th, serial number 746382. Captured Dunkirk, June 1940. D Company, 2nd Battalion, Royal Warwickshire Regiment, SIR. Shuttle narrowed his eyes, walking back to Coward. I addressed the private in row 5. Not you, Sergeant. Why do you answer for him? Private Hoffmann has tuberculosis, Herr Untersturmführer. Transferred here after a sanatorium closure. He's under medical orders not to strain his lungs. I am his section sergeant responsible for his medical protocols, SIR. The lie was plausible, based on military structure and the SS's fear of contagious diseases like TB. Shuttle stared at Coward, seeking deception. Coward met his gaze with the exhausted blankness of a 4-year prisoner. 10, 15, 20 seconds passed. The private will report to the camp medical officer for tuberculosis screening this afternoon. You will ensure his compliance, Sergeant. If he is infectious, his barracks will be quarantined. Shuttle continued his inspection. Roll call ended at Zoo 647. The work details marched to Buna. Wisnia was 5 meters ahead of Coward. The swap had held, but TB screening meant X-rays, records and a tattoo that wouldn't match. The deception needed a solution in 9 hours. Buna factory stretched across 3 square kilometers. British POW construction crews had relative freedom, supervised mainly by Kapos and civilian foremen, not by SS guards, who maintained only perimeter security. Coward found McKibben during a break. The lad in row 5 is compromised. Shuttle ordered a TB screening. They'll know he's not Hoffmann in 5 minutes. Coward spoke low. McKibben spat, his frostbitten fingers flexing. We get him out before the screening. Transfer him to another detail, another compound. 4,000 British POWs are scattered across 6 camps. 1 private vanishes into the crowd. Can't move him today. He's marked for medical. If he doesn't appear, Shuttle will order a manhunt. Coward mentally discarded options. Forging papers was impossible. Bribing Captain Hendry, the British doctor, was pointless, and a distraction too risky. McKibben offered a grim solution. Kill Private Hoffmann. His voice was devoid of emotion. The real one, I mean. Make sure his body is found, documented, and his death certificate filed before the screening. Once Hoffmann is officially dead, the medical order dies with him. No patient, no examination. Coward, shocked, processed the logic. Hoffmann is already dead. Died October 9th. I bribed the capo to delay reporting it to use his identity. Then we undelay the report. Get the death certificate filed today, backdated to the 9th. Shuttle's order references Private Hoffmann. If Hoffmann is officially deceased, the order is void. The lad in row 5 becomes invisible, just another British soldier, no specific identity flagged. McKibben's mind, moulded by 4 years of camp bureaucracy, skillfully exploited loopholes. The plan required reaching Buna's administrative office, where death records were processed. Coward's construction crew had no access, but the Red Cross parcel detail did. British POWs received weekly parcels requiring sign-off. Coward bribed the parcel detail sergeant with cigarettes and sardines for inclusion. At 13:30, Coward entered the admin office, staffed by German civilian clerks and a bored SS Unterscharführer. He waited while the sergeant argued about tobacco rations. The unlocked death records cabinet was against the eastern wall. Coward casually drifted toward it, positioned himself to block the clerk's view, and opened the HK drawer. Hans Hoffmann's death report, filled out but unsubmitted due to Coward's bribe, was there. He pulled it, noting, cause of death, industrial accident, blunt force trauma to the skull. Date, October 9th, 1944. Time, 14:20 hours. Witness, Capo Werner, Buna Construction Section. All accurate, documented, awaiting official submission. Coward folded the paper, slipped it into his jacket, closed the drawer, and rejoined the parcel detail. At 14:45, Coward delivered the document to the SS Unterscharführer, mumbling about finding it misfiled. The officer stamped it without reading, putting it in his outbox for evening filing. Private Hans Hoffmann would be officially dead by 1700. By 1800, when Wisnia was scheduled for TB screening, the medical order would pertain to a corpse. But Schüttl wasn't easily satisfied. At 1635, as work details formed to return to camp, he appeared at the British Assembly Point with 2 guards and a clipboard. "Where is Private Hoffmann, the man ordered for tuberculosis screening?" His eyes scanned the formation. Coward stepped forward. "Private Hoffmann is dead, Herr Untersturmführer. Died 3 days ago in an industrial accident at Buna. The death certificate was misfiled and only reached proper processing this afternoon. I was unaware of his death when I answered for him this morning, sir." The lie was on a knife edge. Did Coward not know, or was he covering up? Schüttl's jaw tightened. "You answered for a dead man, provided his serial number, unit, capture date. You knew these details about a corpse." His hand moved to his Walter P38. The guards shifted. 500 men held their breath. "Private Hoffmann was transferred to my section October 8th. I noted his particulars as regulation requires. He died October 9th, before his integration into the roster was complete. When you asked this morning, I provided what I had from his intake processing. I had not yet been informed of his death, SER. Coward's voice remained steady, his posture perfect. 4 years had taught him to show no fear to the SS. Schüttl withdrew his hand, made a notation. "You will show me Private Hoffmann's body. Now, if it does not exist, or if the death date is falsified, you will join it." He dismissed the others. "Bring the sergeant." The 11-minute walk to the Buna factory morgue was agonizing. Hoffmann's body was real, skull crushed by a girder, but 3 days of decomposition in the cold could complicate identification. If Schüttl questioned the capo, the entire operation could unravel. The morgue reeked of formaldehyde and decay. Duclos, a French POW attendant, led them to pallet 7. Hoffmann Hans, British, died October 9th, industrial accident. He pulled back the canvas. The face was purplish, swollen, but undeniably Hoffmann. Schüttl consulted his clipboard. "Serial number 746382? Coward nodded. "That's what he reported." Schüttl questioned Duclos. "This man died October 9th? Duclos confirmed via his logbook. "We, 14:20 hours, witnessed by Capo Werner." Schüttl's eyes darted between the corpse and Coward, searching for the truth he sensed was hidden. Finally, he waved his hand. "Return to your barracks, Sergeant. In future, ensure you're informed of deaths in your section before answering roll call questions about the deceased. Your ignorance wastes my time." Coward saluted, walking from the morgue with measured steps, battling the urge to run. Only after clearing the factory perimeter and joining the evening column back to E7-15 did he breathe freely. David Wisnia, anonymous in column 3, his British battle dress hidden, his borrowed identity diffused, was safe. But Schüttl's suspicion had been ignited. This close call was a precursor to future scrutiny. The SS officer would watch. He would ask questions. He would connect pieces if Coward attempted another rescue, another penetration. The ghost in Auschwitz had become visible, and visibility in hell promised that death was approaching. January the 27th, 1945, marked the liberation of Monowitz by Soviet forces. Sergeant Charles Joseph Coward, British Army Service number 6289814, witnessed the destruction of the IG Farben synthetic rubber plant, built by Jewish slave laborers, and stood among the camp's emaciated survivors. Severely underweight from intentionally sharing rations with Jewish prisoners, Coward, unlike other British POWs, prioritized securing the camp's meticulously compiled records before greeting his liberators. These documents, gathered over 18 months of covert operations within Auschwitz III, detailed the atrocities. Soviet Major Anatoly Shapiro of the 100th Rifle Division found Coward collapsed, clutching maps of Birkenau's gas chambers, his hands frostbitten from hiding the evidence. Upon Monowitz's liberation at 1500 hours, Coward uniquely rejected immediate medical evacuation. Instead, he guided Red Army intelligence officers, identifying SS personnel, detailing the selection process, and providing photographic memory-based information on unit designations, command structures, and involved IG Farben executives. On February 3rd, Soviet medics finally transferred him, but not before he amassed 7 notebooks filled with survivor testimonies, diligently recording names and addresses for future family tracing. On February 18, 1945, British military authorities received Coward at a Red Cross facility in Odessa. His 11-day debriefing by MI-19, the War Office's Escape and Evasion Intelligence Directorate, deeply impressed Major Norman Crockett, who personally interviewed Coward for 17 hours. Coward's testimony offered the first comprehensive eyewitness account from an Allied serviceman of Auschwitz-Birkenau's industrial-scale extermination. He vividly described the arrival ramp, the selection process, the crematoria's stench, and the massive arrivals of Hungarian Jews in summer 1944. His documentation included precise figures, SS guard numbers, rotation schedules, gas chamber capacities, and victim deception methods. Military intelligence initially classified this material as top secret, grappling with evidence of unprecedented war crimes. Coward's recovery was slow. Diagnosed with chronic dysentery, malnutrition-induced organ damage, and what would later be understood as severe PTSD, he refused psychiatric evaluation, insisting on continued debriefing. By April 1945, as Allied forces liberated other camps, censorship on his testimony was lifted, its horrific details correlating with discoveries at Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, and Dachau. Coward returned to England on May 15, 1945, on a hospital ship from Alexandria, receiving no public recognition or parade. The War Office kept his activities classified, concerned about ongoing intelligence operations and public reaction to such systematic atrocities. After 6 weeks of nutritional rehabilitation at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Netley, where he gained 73 pounds, he remained withdrawn, dedicating hours to correspondence with Jewish organizations, meticulously listing survivors he had helped and attempting to trace some of the 200 prisoners he believed he had aided. His service record showed a history of escape attempts from earlier POW camps, tunnels at Stalag 8B, impersonations at Stalag DXA, and wire-cutting operations, which had earned him solitary confinement, but also a reputation that inadvertently provided cover for his true mission once he realized Monowitz's proximity to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Despite being offered a medical discharge and pension in August 1945, Coward refused, determined to remain available for war crimes prosecutions. In October 1946, Coward received a summons from Nuremberg. Allied prosecutors in Case 6, the IG Farben trial, needed eyewitness testimony linking corporate leadership to slave labor. On December 3, 1946, he testified for 4 hours before the American Military Tribunal in the Palace of Justice, detailing IG Farben's use of Jewish labor at Buna Monowitz, the selection sending weakened workers to Birkenau's gas chambers, and the corporate executives who toured the facility, fully aware of the human cost. He identified Karl Krauch, Otto Ambros, and Heinrich Buterfisch, IG Farben executives he had seen inspecting their SS-rented workforce. Defense attorneys questioned how a British POW could access such information, but Coward's response was devastating. He recounted identity exchanges with Jewish prisoners, quoted SS guards boasting about extermination, and presented a map of the underground pipeline connecting Monowitz to Birkenau, whose purpose had been revealed to him by its prisoner builders. His credibility was further bolstered by Jewish survivors who recognized him, confirmed his smuggling, and validated his warnings about selections. The tribunal's July 1948 judgment cited Coward's testimony as crucial evidence of IG Farben's complicity. Krauch, Ambros and Butterfish received 6, 8 and 6-year sentences respectively. Coward, attending the sentencing, told reporters the punishments were inadequate. British authorities never awarded Coward medals for his Auschwitz actions. His earlier escape attempts were mentioned in MI19's classified history of POW operations, but his unique infiltration missions into an extermination camp defied existing recognition frameworks. He received standard campaign medals, the 1939-1945 Star, the Africa Star, the Defense Medal and the War Medal, but no Victoria Cross, George Cross or Special Commendation. This decision was politically motivated. Recognizing Coward would force an acknowledgement that British POWs had witnessed the Holocaust actively, raising uncomfortable questions about Allied governments' inaction. The Air Ministry, which had dismissed 1944 proposals to bomb Auschwitz rail lines, particularly resisted recognition, as Coward's testimony undermined their arguments. He left military service in November 1948 at age 35, a staff sergeant with a modest disability pension for his lingering dysentery and malnutrition issues. He became a senior clerk at the Egg Marketing Board, a job that used his administrative skills without requiring physical exertion. His colleagues knew nothing of his wartime service. In 1950, he married Mary Smith, had 2 children, and lived quietly in suburban London. His past only surfaced at annual Stalag 8B reunions, where old campmates remembered his escape obsession, unaware of its ultimate destination. The silence surrounding Coward's wartime activities broke in 1963. Louis Fitzgibbon, a British journalist researching IG Farben war crimes, uncovered Coward's Nuremberg testimony in tribunal records. Fitzgibbon's subsequent investigation, including interviews with Israeli Holocaust survivors who described Coward's smuggling, intelligence sharing, and prisoner exchanges, revealed the full scope of his operations. Fitzgibbon's article, The British Schindler of Auschwitz, published in the Sunday Times on November 17, 1963, generated immediate public response. The Board of Deputies of British Jews campaigned for official recognition, and Israel's Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial began investigating whether Coward merited designation as righteous among the nations, an honor for non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews. Yad Vashem researchers interviewed 23 survivors who testified to Coward's aid. The evidence was complex. His prisoner exchanges undeniably saved lives, his food smuggling sustained dozens, and his intelligence warnings helped some avoid selections. However, quantifying the precise number of Jews who survived directly because of his actions remained impossible, given the arbitrary nature of selections, the death machinery's efficiency, and the infinitesimal margins of survival. Yad Vashem concluded that while Coward's actions were extraordinary, a definitive causal link required for the righteous designation could not be established conclusively. They offered to include his testimony in the memorial's archive, which Coward accepted without complaint. British authorities, responding to public pressure, cautiously reassessed his case. The Foreign Office declassified portions of his MI19 debriefing in April 1964, confirming his intelligence gathering and prisoner assistance. The Ministry of Defense convened a review board to consider retrospective recognition. Their December 1964 conclusion stated that while Coward's actions were commendable, they occurred as a POW not engaged in combat. Existing medals required combat valor or escape attempts to rejoin Allied lines. Coward's infiltrations into Auschwitz-Birkenau, though incredibly brave, served humanitarian rather than strictly military objectives. He received a certificate of commendation, a non-medal recognition for exceptional courage and humanity while a prisoner of war, in a private ceremony without public announcement. Some POWs who had genuinely escaped German captivity expressed resentment, feeling Coward was honored for activities outside proper military conduct. This controversy highlighted the tension between traditional military valor and the unique moral challenges posed by the Holocaust. Coward dedicated his remaining years to Holocaust education. He testified at the 1965 Frankfurt Auschwitz trials, providing evidence about IG Farben's operations and identifying former guards. He spoke at schools, synagogues, and veterans organizations, describing his experiences and emphasizing the possibility of rescue even within the death camps. His presentations were devoid of self-aggrandizement, focusing instead on the Jewish prisoners he aided, many of whom he could name, but whose ultimate fates remained unknown. He corresponded with survivors, attended commemorations, and donated his papers to the Imperial War Museum. His health declined throughout the 1970s, as his dysentery and malnutrition from Monowitz led to progressive kidney failure. He died on December 18, 1976, at age 63 in his London home. The Times obituary, published December 21st, briefly summarized his wartime service as the POW who smuggled food to Auschwitz prisoners. Mary Coward received condolences from survivors globally, many expressing profound gratitude for her husband's life-saving interventions. Testimonies that filled a cardboard box, illustrating the undocumented impact of his actions. For 2 decades, Coward's legacy remained marginalized. Military historians focused on dramatic POW escapes like the Wooden Horse or the Great Escape, operations aimed at combat and tying down enemy forces. Coward's mission, his infiltrations into an extermination camp to save civilians, defied existing military valor templates. Holocaust historians concentrated on Jewish resistance, righteous Gentiles, or diplomatic efforts. A uniformed serviceman trading identities with condemned prisoners occupied an ambiguous space, his status complicating narratives of civilian rescue. His story, though present in archives and survivor testimonies, received limited scholarly attention until 1993, with John Castle's Coward of Auschwitz. Castle's research, utilizing German camp records released after the Cold War, corroborated Coward's testimony, documented his punishments for unauthorized movements, and revealed SS reports of a British NCO suspected of trading with Jewish prisoners. Castle argued that Coward's intelligence provided critical evidence for war crimes prosecutions, offering a unique perspective from inside the Nazi extermination system. British military academies began incorporating his story into ethics training, showcasing his self-directed humanitarian mission as a case study in moral courage. In 1999, prompted by Castle's book and lobbying from Jewish organizations, the Ministry of Defense conducted a final review of Coward's service. They concluded that a retrospective award of the George Medal, Britain's civilian gallantry decoration, was appropriate for his life-saving actions as a POW at grave personal risk. In March 2000, 65 years after liberation, Mary Coward, then 82, received the medal from Defense Minister Jeff Hoon at a ceremony at the Imperial War Museum. The citation honored Coward for repeatedly risking execution to smuggle food and intelligence to Jewish prisoners at Auschwitz III Monowitz. Survivors from Israel, Canada, and the United States attended, 3 testifying his identity exchanges directly saved their lives. This delayed recognition underscored the difficulty military institutions faced in acknowledging humanitarian valor, a process that took decades. Modern military survival training now references Coward's operations as proof that resistance is possible even in oppressive systems. The SERI course at RAF St. Mathon analyzes how Coward exploited contradictions within the Nazi system, such as the assumption that POWs would prioritize escape over aiding civilians and the bureaucratic complexity that enabled identity exchanges. His story is a unique form of evasion, not fleeing captivity, but manipulating it to create humanitarian space within genocide. His repeated, estimated 50 to 100 entries into Auschwitz-Birkenau demonstrate systematic planning, exploitation of shift changes and guard corruption, and precise camp geography, not tactics for replication, but principles for understanding that enemy systems, even at their most brutal, contain vulnerabilities. Resistance takes many forms beyond escape. Yad Vashem, despite its earlier non-designation, included his story in their 2011 Righteous Among Nations exhibition, acknowledging that rigid criteria inadequately capture moral complexity. His photograph, depicting a slight man in British battle dress with eyes that convey a profound experience, hangs with a caption noting his repeated intentional entries into hell when all others tried escaping it. This image serves as enduring testimony that humanity persists even in its absence, that individual moral action retains meaning against absolute evil, and that courage is choosing to bind oneself to others' fates rather than retreating into personal survival.